For decades, video games were seen as the future of entertainment. Every year brought groundbreaking ideas, technological leaps, and unforgettable experiences for the players. From the early days of arcades to the rise of home consoles, gaming has constantly pushed boundaries over the decades. But today, something feels different. Gamers across the world are asking the same questions. Why does modern gaming feel so much worse than it used to? Games launch broken. Microtransactions dominate design. Massive studio layoffs for developers while posting record profits. And instead of pioneering bold new ideas, we're getting endless remakes, sequels, and live service experimentation. Now, to be clear, gaming isn't dead. Incredible games still release every year, but the industry itself, the way the games are made, funded, and sold, has changed from a fundamental perspective. So today, I'm going to break down why I think the modern gaming industry is in decline, what caused it, and whether things might eventually improve or if we're just doomed to this endless cycle of microtransactions. Because to understand truly where gaming is going, we first need to understand what it is that broke the industry in the first place. The Golden Age mentality. To understand the current industry, we need to go back at least 20 years to what many players consider gaming's golden age. During the late 90s and even early 2000s, and really even the early 2010s, studios were constantly experimenting. Teams were smaller, budgets were lower, and publishers were more willing to take risk. Developers focused primarily on one thing and one thing only, and that thing was making a great game. If the game was fun, if the game was innovative, or if it was memorable, then it would sell. That was the philosophy of the industry at the time. Games launched as completed products. Expansions existed, but the base game was expected to feel finished. Players bought a game once and owned the full experience of that game. There was also a sense that the developers and players were on the same page about things. They were on the same team. Studios wanted to impress gamers, not monetize them as aggressively as possible through microtransactions. The industry has never been perfect. There were rushed games, and there were bad releases even back then. But the overall structure of the industry was very different. Gaming was still growing. When industries grew quickly, creativity tends to flourish. However, as gaming became one of the largest entertainment industries in the world, something changed. Money. A lot of money got injected into the industry in a short period of time. The corporatization of gaming is what happened. The video game industry generates hundreds of billions of dollars every year. And with that level of money came corporate influence. Large publishers are no longer just creative companies looking to make a great product. They're massive corporations with shareholders, quarterly earnings reports, and constant, endless pressure for growth. And shareholders, they don't want good games. They want a return on their investment. They want maximum profit. This shift has fundamentally changed the way that games are designed. Instead of asking, what would make this game great? Developers are now being asked, how can this game make more money per player? This is where many modern gaming trends originate. How can this game make the biggest return on investment? Features like microtransactions, cosmetic stores, premium currencies, battle passes, paid progression systems, they didn't happen randomly. This wasn't a happy coincidence. These were carefully designed revenue strategies by the corporations to monetize your game. Many modern games are built around engagement metrics. How long a player stays, how often they log in, and how likely are they to spend their money. And when monetization became the priority, gameplay suffered. Players began to notice this shift quickly, and that's when the trust started to erode in the gaming industry between players and the publishers. Microtransactions and monetization became the new norm. Microtransactions are one of the most controversial aspects of modern gaming. Originally, they were small optional purchases, things like extra skins, bonus content, DLC, etc. But over time, they evolved into something much, much larger, and many modern games now include cosmetic stores, loot boxes, premium currencies, battle passes, paid experience boost, seasonal content subscriptions, and a whole plethora of downloadable content that you can spend your money on. And in some cases, progression itself can be intentionally slowed down to encourage you to spend money. Instead of paying once for a complete product, players are now expected to spend money dozens of times over a game's lifespan. From a business perspective, this model is incredibly profitable. From a player's perspective, it's exploitative, especially when full-priced games, something that usually costs nowadays around $70 or more, still include aggressive monetization systems. This is creating a feeling that the players are no longer the audience, but rather they're the product. The live service experiment. Another shift that came in modern gaming is the rise of the live service games. A live service game is designed basically to operate continuously for years through updates, new seasons, monetizations, and resets. So in theory, that model sounds pretty good. The problem is that players receive constant new content, developers maintain an active community, and the game evolves over time, but the live service model has created several problems. First is that many games launched unfinished. No longer is it the expectation that you are paying for a finished product, right? Developers will launch a finished game and then they'll say that it's missing features, it has bugs, there's content gaps that will be fixed later through patches. Players are essentially becoming paid beta testers, right? Second, publishers often chase trends rather than focusing on strong gameplay. When one live service game becomes successful, dozens of companies try to emulate that formula. This has resulted in a market that is flooded with live service titles competing for the same player base, and the reality is most of them fail. The players only have time for a few long-term games. When every studio tries to build the next endless multiplayer ecosystem, many projects are collapsing under their own weight, and we're basically just doomed to fail from the start. So now we have rising costs and studios that have an aversion to risk. Most modern AAA games are incredibly expensive to produce. Some of the major titles now cost hundreds of millions of dollars to develop. That level of investment makes publishers extremely cautious when publishing any new video games. If a new idea fails, it can cost a company enormous sums of money. So instead of experimenting with new concepts and new ideas, studios often rely on the safer options, which is sequels, remakes, reboots, and established franchises. Now, that doesn't mean that these games are automatically bad. In fact, many are actually fantastic, but when the industry relies heavily on familiar brands, creativity stagnates. Risk becomes something to avoid rather than embrace. Ironically, this means that the biggest studios, the ones with the most resources, often take the fewest risk. Imagine that. The biggest studios, the ones with the most money to spend and invest in a product, are taking the smallest amount of risk possible. So now we have developer burnout. So behind every modern game, there's hundreds or sometimes even thousands of developers. There's artists, programmers, designers, writers, testers, and many of them are working under intense pressure by these publishers and these corporations to get the games out on a deadline, finished or not. This crunch refers to a period of extreme overtime used to meet unrealistic deadlines set by these corporations. Developers will work night, weekends, long hours for months on end. Okay? While some studios have made efforts to improve working conditions, the crunch still exists across many parts of the industry. And the consequences are serious for this. You have developer burnout, high employee turnover, mental health struggles, and sometimes unfinished or rushed products just to meet a deadline. When developers are constantly pushed to their limits, creativity and quality suffers as a result. And ultimately, players are the ones that ultimately feel the results of these unfinished products, and the industry as a whole suffers for it. So, now that we know what the problem is, what is the solution? What is the possible solution that could turn this ship around? So, ironically, while parts of the AAA gaming industry are struggling, independent developers are thriving. Indie studios are often smaller, they're more flexible, they're less constrained by corporate policies and pressures, and more importantly, they're more accepting of taking risk. This allows them to experiment with new gameplay ideas, new art styles, new storytelling techniques. Most of the creative and beloved games of the past decades have not come from the AAA studios. They have come from small, independent teams. These developers are reminding players of something important, and that's that great games don't require massive budgets. Great games don't require a team of executives and corporate oversight. What great games require is a vision and passion. So, what can we draw from this? What is the conclusion of all of this? Is the gaming industry truly in decline? Well, not exactly. But is it going through a difficult transition? Yes. Corporate pressure, aggressive monetization, massive development costs have reshaped the way that modern games are made. At the same time, passionate indie developers and passionate independent creators are continuing to push the envelope and drive the industry forward. The future of gaming is not predetermined, and things can be turned around. It will be shaped by the choices that players make. It will be shaped by the choices that studios make and by the standards that we as the players set. Because ultimately, the industry will follow the audience, and gamers still have the power to decide what kind of games succeed and what kind of games will fail. That's my rant, and thanks for watching.